Hello, everyone, and welcome to A New Direction. My name is Jay Izzo, and oh man, do we have another great show for you today. It's so easy. I mean, I have the easiest job in the world. You get a great guest who writes a great book. I just got to have a great show. I mean, it's absolutely magnificent for me. I mean, this doesn't get any better than this. I have with me Mindy Vail. She has written this outstanding comprehensive, practical toolbox in a book called The Mindshift Effect, where change management is redefined and leadership is refined. Let me just say to you all over the world, and by the way, thank you all over the world for watching us, listening to us, downloading us. We appreciate you. Here's what I'm going to say to you about the Mindshift Effect. Do you ever have to be are you ever faced with change? Dumb question, I know, because we all are. And how many of you out there like it? Raise your hands. Okay, that's nobody. Okay, I got that. That's good. Good for you. Nobody likes change. Now, since nobody likes change, let's put them all in one group called a business, and then let's have a change. And let's say that business is 50 people to 500 to maybe 5,000 people who don't like change, and you none of you like change, and so now we're going to make a business change. How do you think that's going to go? Not too good, is it? No, it's not. In fact, it's going to go horribly wrong typically, because we are human beings that are resistant to change. There is a thing called psychological reactance, where we feel our freedom has been taken away, and so we react with resistance, right? It's a natural part of our human being, if you will. So how do we manage it? How do we lead through it? How do we help our people get through it? Well, that is the question that Mindy Vail is responding to with the Mindshift Effect. And so, folks, get your pens and your paper or your pencils out, except if you're driving. Don't do that, but do that when you get home. But take notes, listen to the show again, and because we're going to talk about that today. Before we get to her, though, let's do what we do every week, right? And that is this. We are four-part people: physical, mental, emotional, spiritual people. And the fact of the matter is, we are never static. We are in constant change, which means that if we're not growing, we're dying. So we have to do something every day to work on these four areas of our life: physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, right? So what we do on the show every week is we have you check in with where you're at. Scale of 1 to 10, 1 being, can't get any worse, 10 being, it can't be any better. So 5 being average. So let's talk about physical, for instance. How would you evaluate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10 when it comes to eating right, getting enough exercise, getting enough sleep, drinking enough water, taking care of your body? How would you rate yourself? Now listen, if your number is low, that's not a place to be alarmed. That is your starting point that we're going to build from here, okay? Because we're not going to go from a 2 to a 10, but maybe we can get from a 2 to 2.5. And that's all we're asking. And then if you're at a 2.5, how do I get myself to a 3? Okay? So don't beat yourself up here, right? We just need to get moving forward, all right? All right, so that's the first number. Second number is your mental and intellectual number. Right? You have to be proactive in this. You have to be a learner. You have to be curious. You want to get through change. Part of change is asking the right questions. Part of change is keep learning, keep growing, right? Have a growth mindset, right? Because growth mindset is about change, right? And you need to be an active participant in your growth, not just sit on a couch and think that you're some sort of couch potato, then you'll absorb information. Here's a great idea. Read a book. That will help you immensely. But there's other things you do. You know, I tell my coaching clients, I don't mind you listening to a book, but when you're done listening to a section, write down 2 or 3 things from your book that you're going to take action on today. Right? Do that. Right? If you're in a podcast, right? Listen, this is a podcast. I get it. I love you listening to my podcast, but then write down 2 or 3 things that you can take action on what Mindy and I are talking about today. Right? So that's your second number. Third number is the emotional number. And Dr. Daniel Goleman has written tons on emotional quotients and emotional intelligence, and it's all brilliant, but we make it really simple. How would you evaluate yourself on these 2 areas? 1, how well are you able to control your emotions under stress and pressure? And two, how well are you able to tap into and understand the emotions of another person? Mindy talks about in her book the power of empathy when it comes to change. And it's really, really important. It's an important piece for us to recognize. The problem for some of us is, and she brings this up in the book, is that sometimes we don't even want to take the time to be empathetic, but more so, I think there is a fear of it. And I also would argue that we don't have the emotional vocabulary to deal empathetically with others. Expand your emotional vocabulary. Google it. Find the subtleties in the emotions. You'll find that you'll be able to relate to people, your business people, your colleagues. You'll find it, your spouses, your children. If you just expand that emotional vocabulary, they'll feel understood. And let me tell you something. When people feel understood, they feel empowered. So on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you value yourself emotionally? And then finally, there's a spiritual area. And listen, we're all spiritual beings. We just are covered and shrouded in this body, right, that we have to deal with from time to time. And let me just say this about our spiritual selves. We all live by faith. You woke up this morning sipping your cup of coffee, believing it wasn't poisonous. You pushed the button on your car, believing it was going to start. You saw the walk sign that said walk, and you believe the cars weren't going to hit you. You made plans for the future that haven't happened yet. That's faith. All faith. And by the way, here's the other thing. What brings you back to peace and joy in the midst of your chaos? Is it God? Is it nature? Is it meditation? Is it something else? And then the big question is, how's that working for you? And what might you need to do to change it? Those 4 areas are like the air in the tires of your car. If one tire is a little too low or too flat, what happens? Well, it's really hard to steer the car. What happens if all 4 tires are low? Well, over the course of time, you know what you're going to do? You're going to ruin the car. And speaking of someone who's got all her tires in the right inflation area, her name is Mindy Vail. She founded the Mindshift Effect out of her love for leadership development and change management. She has witnessed the many barriers to successful organizational transformation and understands how daunting it can feel when searching for the right information or trying to narrow focus amidst so much noise. With 25 years of experience in leadership development, change management, education, and public speaking, Mindy has worked with emerging leaders to veteran executives. Her focus is cultivating a growth mindset and fostering resilience. Her new book, The Mindshift Effect, where change management is redefined and leadership is defined, provides a wellspring, and I would go beyond that. It is just a practical toolbox and inspiration for leading in meaningful organizational change. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show and welcome to First Time. Mindy Vail, welcome to A New Direction.
Thank you, Coach Jay. It is an honor to be here, and I don't even know how to follow that introduction. You've said it all. You laid it out so well, and I appreciate all those points that you touched on and set the course for this conversation with. That was great. Thank you.
Well, thank you. So let's do this. The introduction is where we should start because you asked the question, and I think people want to know, what is the Mindshift Effect? So, and you start talking about that there is a need everything when it comes to change management and leadership change, leading through change, so academic, and you felt like we need to do something different. So then you come up with the Mindshift Effect, and so help us understand what that means ultimately, and then how we're going to view change leadership and change management differently.
So I think to begin with, when I reflect back on my experiences through public education, K-12, and then corporate franchise systems, it doesn't matter what industry you're in. It doesn't matter what environment you work in. The same rules apply when it comes to human behavior. And that is when you try to lead a team, whether it be students in a classroom or educated adults in a corporate environment, when you try to lead, you have to, again, to your point in the introduction, have some form of empathy. You have to understand how people respond to different stimuli, including change being one of the biggest ones right now. And we talked a little bit about this prior to the podcast starting, in that the world is full of change right now that is rapidly changing. I mean, we are bombarded. And sometimes we just don't know how to process that.
Mhm.
And when we try to move too quickly as a leader, we leave our team behind and we wonder why we didn't get the results we wanted. And so I was looking at change and leadership as they're often siloed when they're written about or discussed. And really, they're one of the same, because you can't have successful change and transformation without great leaders.
Mm.
And then conversely, you can't have great leaders if they don't understand the impact that change has on human behavior.
Mm.
So I went to the psychology degree that I got 30 years ago, and I'm like, so much of this resonates with me because it is about psychology. It's about the neuropsychology that is going on in our brains at all times of the day, 24/7, never stops, it never turns off.
Right.
And as leaders, when we can understand that, and then we can become more self-aware of our own responses to change, that's a game changer.
Mm. It's interesting because I opened up the show with that we typically just do not like change. It's something that we are resistant to, at least. Just think about ourselves. I can't speak for you, but I really don't like getting older. I don't like it. I don't like the changes that are happening to myself. And then if I've worked at an industry, right, we don't handle change very well when we've been doing the same job the same way, day after day, year after year after year. Even though we may say we're bored, we do not want change. Getting leaders to tap into that, because I think this is the piece that's often missed, is that it's the worker who's dealing with the change, but sometimes leadership just is not empathetic enough, towards the employees to understand that change. Do you find that same?
Absolutely. I see the lack of empathy.
Mhm.
Just that we've made a decision. Doesn't really matter if you're on board or not. We're
Mm.
doing this.
Mhm.
Your position is going to dramatically change, but we're not going to worry about that because you're going to stay with us anyway. You need a job.
Right.
You're replaceable. If you want to leave, leave.
Right.
And it's kind of that real
Right.
unfortunate attitude around, we're just going to do it because we say so.
Right.
And it's like that parent to say, you're doing this because I told you so. There's no why behind it. There's no what's in it for me behind it. It's just, you're doing this because I said so. And we forget as leaders that people do see it as a fear. They do see it as a unknown. They do see it as, holy cow, this is threatening my safety, whether it be mental safety and security or whether it be my job.
Mm.
Gosh, what if this change creates such a transformation that I don't have a job anymore? I can't pay my bills. I can't provide for my family. Those kinds of things go on in people's heads all the time.
Right.
But we
Right.
forget that. We
Yeah.
forget those fundamental core things of, holy cow, these are people's livelihoods.
And we're creatures of habit
Yes.
and routine, right? And as you bring out in part one, understanding change, and then this first section, the neuropsychology of change, our amygdala doesn't like that change, because it when we are faced with, my routine has to be changed, right? In the hippocampal area and the amygdala start going up. And I'm not trying to be real technical here, folks. That's not what I'm trying to do. But you just need to know that there are places in your limbic system, your brain, and the darker parts of your brain that are contributing to this problem, right?
Absolutely. And the amygdala, just for people who want to go back to their high school psychology class or college class, that's that fight or flight system that we all are aware of, I think, at some level. And that kicks in when we see that threat, even though we don't maybe even necessarily consciously know that it's a threat. Our amygdala immediately recognizes it as one, says, this is unfamiliar. I don't like it. And it triggers this stress and anxiety that makes adapting more difficult. And sometimes we don't even process that that's what's going on, but our body is reacting to it. Our brain is reacting to it. And so it's our brain's way to try to protect us.
Right.
So it's well intended, but it can also often hold us back because of the anxiety that it creates. And to your point, We love that predictability because
Yes.
decision making where that all takes place, it makes it tough to think clearly when we're under stress or anxiety, right? And so we get clouded judgment, we become a little irrational. And in order to create those new pathways, it takes effort and it feels really uncomfortable at times.
Mm.
And when we feel uncomfortable, it's often easier just to walk away or resist.
Mhm. I think it's interesting. You brought up, the fight. I think we're pretty much aware of fight, flight, freeze. I think we're
Mhm.
aware of those three. But I thought what you did a beautiful job here in this book was you talked about the two that we rarely talk about: fawning and flopping.
Mhm.
Right? Because I don't think people understand that we could be triggered to fawn and flop. So help people understand fawning and flopping.
Yeah, you'll see fawning as people pleasing, people who react in, if I just do this, they'll be happy and they'll leave me alone. And they're the people pleasers who just can't say no, and they just go along with everything in an effort to defend themselves, in an effort to just save themselves. And then the flop is almost just like I'm done, I give up.
Yep.
I surrender to the circumstances. I'm a victim of it all. It is what it is.
Yeah. That's the point, right? It's the
Yeah.
victim mentality. I am helpless to it.
Yes. Yes.
Right?
I no longer have control over this situation,
Mm,
even though they probably do at some level.
mm,
And so as coaches, you and I, we know getting them to see what they can control in what appears initially to be an uncontrollable situation, that's huge. That can be a breakthrough for anyone to say, you have this you can control,
right.
and that can save you.
Yeah. That's, I love the fact that you mentioned those other two, because I think it's really important for people to understand that your people pleasing mode in the midst of change is actually can be a physiological response in the brain, as well as your I'm helpless. Victim mentality can be too, as well, if we're not careful. Doesn't mean that you can't overcome it.
That's
Just
right.
means you need to be aware of it.
That's right.
I want to go to a section here called strategies for embracing and navigating change. And you talk about the Kubler-Ross change curve. And it's so interesting because, Dr. Kubler-Ross wrote the book on death and dying in 1969, right? We all know it. And we've often used it for grief management, but we don't think about the Kubler-Ross change curve when it comes to change management. And I think it would just be fun for us to go through the 5 stages. I used to call it DABDA, right? Was my acronym, right? As in, Yabba Dabda do is what I would do it with. But let's talk about the Kubler-Ross change curve and why that's an important way for us to look at navigating change.
I love that you brought that up. And I do love this as a visual for me. When I worked with my teams in a corporate setting, at least, I would say, okay, where do you feel you are on this change curve right now? Where we are in this change initiative, where do you see yourself? And then I would say, this is where I see you. Let's talk about that. And so first is that shock and denial. We all at some level, whether it's significant or not, we have that initial paralysis at hearing this news of this is about to happen. And then we kind of go into that denial of avoiding the inevitable, of maybe they'll just blow it off. Maybe it won't actually take place. Maybe I don't have much to do with it. Maybe it won't impact me. And when we realize that, oh, this is actually happening and I am going to be impacted by it, we can become frustrated and often maybe even angry. Right. And so that's where the original model from death and dying came in of I'm just angry. I'm sitting with anger. But what they've learned over the years is that is the same in a corporate setting. When change happens of I'm mad. I'm mad that they're doing this. I don't agree with it. I don't think we need to do it. I think it's stupid. I think we've tried it before and it didn't work. What we've been doing forever works. I don't know why we have to change. And so that anger can kick in, right? And it can either be directed at yourself internally, or you've seen leaders who, unfortunately, will direct their anger at other people. Mm. And then comes in that the bargaining phase of the change curve of you're kind of seeking new ways to figure it out. You're looking for a little bit more information. The reality has set in that this is happening. Okay, I guess I have to play along. And you start to negotiate. Whether you can postpone things, whether you have a say in things, whether you have a seat at the table, what you can and can't control, you begin the bargaining. Mm. Then comes, and this is really interesting when it comes to corporate environments, it comes the depression. Mm-hmm. We get that when it comes to loss and grief, but we don't often associate that in our professional worlds of realizing that the bargaining isn't working and that the change is happening no matter what. And often you'll see individuals kind of fall into this pit of sadness of they withdraw. Yep. They aren't participating as much anymore. There's kind of a deep sense of loss of what they used to know to be true about the environment they'd show up to every day. And sometimes you don't see that at all with people. Some people will skip right over, but other people, it sits heavy with them. And if leaders don't recognize that, that fourth stage can be critical in losing great employees. Yep. And then, of course, there's the acceptance stage of, okay, I have now come to realize that this is part of my life. And I'm seeing actually the benefits of this change finally. And I get it. Yeah, it was a tough road to get here, but I appreciate the work that we did. And there's a reward at the end. Yeah. And that when you can get your whole team, company involved in that, acknowledging that acceptance, that involvement, then you can sustain the change.
Yeah.
While people are still down in the depression, maybe people are still even way back at the denial.
Yeah.
You're not going to have full sustainability chances to really get to your desired state.
Yeah. And I think what happens is, as leaders, at least I've run into this, and I'm sure you have too. I mean, we've coached a number of leaders, but there are very few of them that I've run across that understand this concept because they're pushing so hard. And it's not that I'm blaming them, but they're pushing so hard for the change.
Yes.
They're not paying attention to the bodies that are falling down around them is what I like to say. And I don't mean to laugh at it, but it's crazy how, you could be pushing so hard and you don't see all the shrapnel that's been blowing off, and you've now got bodies dropping all over the place, and you don't understand why we're not productive or why we're not efficient or why, there is a reluctance or whatever it may be, because you're so busy pushing change.
Yeah, and you made me think of like Maxwell's different styles of leadership. Mm-hmm. Of if you follow a leader at the very, very foundational level, it's just because they tell you to do something and you have a job and you have to do it. You have to agree. But then it goes up to what you were saying of when you realize all of these things and you have an empathetic response to change and how that's impacting those around you, people actually want to work for you. They actually want to help you with the change initiative.
Right.
It changes from I have to I want to.
Right.
Yeah. And that's everything. That's when you have elevated your leadership abilities to mastery almost. It's hard.
Her name is Mindy Vail. The book is entitled The Mindshift Effect, where change management is redefined and leadership is refined. Isn't she awesome? I know she is. You're listening to her here on A New Direction. Hey, folks, whether you're recovering from an injury or surgery, suffering everyday aches and pains, having difficulty performing activities of daily living, or unable to perform, your athletic event because you're a professional athlete or, maybe you're a high school athlete. Listen, here's the deal. They're going to customize the treatment program just for you. All right. So when you're looking for your epic relief, epic recovery, epic results, don't look any further. I want you to go to epicpt.com. It's EPICPT.com. And Linda Craft Team Realtors, for more than 39 years, they've been helping the world transition in life. And you said, hold on here, the real estate, what does it mean transition life? Really simple. right? Every place you've ever lived has been a transition in life, right? So listen, they know how to take the stress out of that part of that transition. So whether you want to sell your home or you want to buy your first or your next home, start with Linda Craft Team Realtors. It's lindacraft.com, LINDACRAFT.com. And we're back here on A New Direction with Mindy Vail, the book, The Mindshift Effect, where change management is redefined and leadership is refined. Fabulous book. I really recommend it. So many tools and pieces here for you to chew on and use for your company. And by the way, let me just say this. Some books have been written that have one size of a business in mind. This is not that book. I do not care what size your business is. I don't care if you're a startup business, as an entrepreneur and you have very few people, or you are a corporation with thousands. I am telling you, this book, The Mindshift Effect, fits every occasion. How about that? So please get yourself a copy of The Mindshift Effect. Mindy, I want to talk about strategies to embrace and navigate change. You have several things that you've outlined here. The first one is cultivate resilience, embrace self-care, maintain perspective, establish achievable goals and productive habits, embrace lessons from adversity. And then you go practice gratitude. I'm a gratitude person. I love gratitude. I believe starting my day with gratitude. Explain gratitude and change and why this is important. I think we could get the rest of them. But why gratitude?
For me, gratitude is everything, truly everything. It reminds me to focus on the good, live in reality, understand that a lot's going on. There's stressors, there's anxieties, there's everything that's happening. I'm not ignorant. But in order to deal with all of those, practicing gratitude keeps me grounded in what is good, not only in my world, but in the world around me. And when I'm approached with a change, it allows me to see it more as an adventure than as something negative that's happening to me. It's an adventure I go on and that I get to ride rather than something that's being forced. That mind shift, the effect of that has been huge for my own life, personally and professionally. And I say that, and to your point, it doesn't matter what size company. It doesn't even matter that you're talking professionally. It's a personal thing too. How do I look at my life every day? Am I going to be a victim of it, or am I going to be in charge of it? And when I practice gratitude, I'm in charge of it. It just happens naturally. Your brain evolves to appreciate what's around you and to embrace the change that is inevitable in your life. And so every day to just wake up and say, what am I going to be grateful for today? What was I grateful for yesterday? What am I really looking forward to? What makes me full of joy? There's nothing that is better for me as a person than practicing gratitude.
And I want to give you some kudos here again. I'm going to give you credit on a lot of things and congratulate you because it's so good. But I want to just read something that you wrote, and I want people to listen to this very, very careful what Mindy wrote because it's so true. Cultivating gratitude serves a guiding light through uncertain times, activating brain regions associated with dopamine, linked to pleasure and reward, and stimulating the release of serotonin and oxytocin, fostering happiness and well-being. This practice can lead to long-term changes in neural pathways promoting mental health and resilience. Folks, what Mindy has just so eloquently stated here and in her book is that by practicing gratitude, you are changing your brain. It is better than your cup of coffee when you start your day with gratitude. You're lighting up parts of your brain and releasing neurotransmitters that are happy transmitters. And I would like to suggest, and I think Mindy will agree with me, and if Mindy, if you don't, you're free to do so. Stop watching the news and start practicing gratitude.
You couldn't have said it better. I've had this conversation with a few of my close friends of you've got to turn the TV off. It is good to know what's happening in the world.
Yep.
But turn it off. Stop watching CNN all day long. Stop watching Fox News all day long. Stop doing that to yourself.
Yep.
It gets you nowhere. And there is absolutely nothing positive or meaningful that will come from long periods of time sitting in front of that. Period. It will not help you.
Ladies and gentlemen, she's beating on her computer as she's saying this to you. This is how impassioned.
I'm passionate about this.
She's a little passionate about this either. Good for you. There are three others here that you mentioned. Embrace support and connection, and I think that's absolutely true. If we want to get through change, we got to the support that we have around us, family, friends, or whatever, colleagues. Then the last two, and I want us to talk about those two: focus on a growth mindset and finding humor, because that last one is one that was an unexpected to me, but I agree with it. So let's talk a little bit, because you and I talk a lot about mindset, and this book is entitled The Mindshift Effect, and mindset has a lot to do with a growth mindset, has a lot to do with how we're going to handle change. So let's talk about that.
Yeah, it does. And the humor, really, your brain is responding to humor the same way it responds to the gratitude. Mm-hmm. In the sense that your endorphins are going crazy and you just feel good when you laugh. I don't know that anybody could argue that. When you can get someone to smile or laugh, it changes the whole dynamic of the relationship. And so it's not saying that you have to laugh at everything. I am not an advocate of toxic positivity at all.
Right, I agree.
Right, but to be able to laugh at yourself, because we're all human, we make mistakes, we're not perfect. And I think that in my journey, in my career as a leader, being able to laugh at myself allows my team to laugh at themselves. It allows for that psychological safety to be created, an environment where we can be real and we know we're not perfect and we're going to fumble and we're going to mess up, and then we can laugh about it. Like, it's just, it makes things so much lighter.
It does.
And so much easier to deal with when we're going through something that is stressful.
Yeah. I mean, I think what we do is we underestimate the power of humor. I think we think humor is a luxury, right? That, that's something that, I don't really have the time to laugh. I mean, think about it, right? We have comedy clubs so that we can say, I have chosen to find a place to laugh, versus saying, no, it's one of the many emotions that I have available to me that I should be using more regularly, which will do so much more for me. And we don't, and folks, let me just tell you something. I get it that you facing circumstances. Mindy does too. We understand that you're facing circumstances, but folks, when you can laugh through the circumstances, boy, it's much easier to handle them. Right?
It's so much easier, Jay. And I think you've probably seen this time and time again, where we unfortunately have leaders who feel like if they laugh, it's a weakness.
Yeah.
Just as in showing any kind of emotion, outward emotion, is a weakness.
Right.
And that's so unfortunate, because I feel like we have been conditioned historically to believe, especially men, that you don't want to give too much of your emotional self to others, otherwise you might be considered as weak. And that's just so unfortunate, because when you can laugh appropriately, of course,
right,
there's always a time and a place,
right,
but when you can laugh and when you can see the humor in life, because there's a lot to laugh at, it just makes for a better day. And therefore, to your point, like, we all have things going on. We're not pretending we don't. But to take time in our everyday lives to smile and laugh and practice that gratitude, it changes the neural pathways, and our brains will respond to things so much differently. It's not going to happen overnight, right? None of this is an overnight, but it takes practice just like anything else. But we can do it. We can change the way we think.
And we got to learn to laugh at ourselves. I think one of the things that it starts with is being able to laugh at yourself. Being able to walk into a room, and we've all done this, folks. You've walked into a room and you've forgotten what you walked in the room for. Okay, I don't care how old you are. We've all done it. A lot of things you might laugh at yourself. Have you ever gotten up too quick from a chair and got dizzy? Laugh at yourself. It's okay. All right. These are, have you ever put the knife in the fork drawer? Okay. I mean, just laugh at yourself, because it starts with you being able to not beat yourself up, but laugh at yourself. And that's what I believe that's what you're saying. And I believe that's what we are saying together.
It is. We have to let go of that pride a little bit that we're not perfect. And for me, I used to have a really hard time laughing at myself. I'd get embarrassed really quickly and mortified that I made a mistake or, did something in front of people that I was embarrassed by. And then I taught high school English. And if you can't laugh at yourself, you're doomed. So I learned really quickly that I was an entertainer more than I was a teacher. And whenever I messed up, it made for a better day. Yeah. So not that I would intentionally do that, but when I did, I had to learn to laugh at myself. And then I realized I enjoyed my job more.
Yeah.
And I became a better teacher.
Right.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
It's crazy.
Did the same thing when I was teaching, and I felt laughter was so important to the classroom. Moving on down the road, you have this thing about encouraging curiosity and exploration as part of managing change or leading change. Talk about encouraging that curiosity and exploration.
That goes to the psychological safety of when you are leading a team. You want people to be able to ask questions. You want to have the hows, but why? But what? When? And be able to ask questions that may even seem repetitive or silly, because those questions could lead potentially to an answer we haven't explored yet. And so when you can create that safe environment where people feel like they won't be judged or criticized for asking the stupid question, it creates this spirit of innovation and creativity, because now our minds are unlocked. They're not shut down. And we feel safe to explore all different pathways. And cultures, I've seen firsthand witness cultures where leaders shut that down. And they either deliberately or unconsciously judge outwardly. And so people just kind of become recluse and say, well, I'm not going to say anything because I felt like a jerk the last time I did, or I felt embarrassed. And so everybody sits back and they don't contribute. And then I've seen those leaders who are like, go, what questions do you have? Let's throw them up on the board. Let's take as much time as we need. And we'll get somewhere. And they do. And that's where the innovation comes from.
Yeah, I think we, if you want to get through change, treat it as a learning opportunity. Right? I mean, that's where I pulled out from what you were saying here, is that when you are inherently curious about the change and you start creating curiosity and innovation, and you take a creative view of it, then change looks just a little bit differently for you.
And not just change, but failure.
Right. Yeah, right.
Failure is a learning opportunity.
Right.
We have been so conditioned over the years of growing up that failure, when you mess up, when you don't score that goal, when you don't do this, you failed. And that then, just to your point of change, that then brings this feeling of despair of, I don't want to try that again. I didn't like the way they responded. I didn't like the way I felt. I'm going to avoid that.
Right.
When we see it as an opportunity to learn, then we say, okay, that didn't work out exactly how I wanted it to, but what did I get from that?
Right.
How can I now take what I learned and move it into this so that if that ever happens again, I can switch and try something different. And if I fail again, I fail again. So what? I've fallen flat on my face so many times. And again, goes to the power of laughter. Then you laugh at yourself.
Right. kind of a circular thing, isn't it?
It really is.
Her name is Mindy Vail. She awesome. She really is really that awesome. Great coach too, by the way. You're looking for a great coach. I'm just telling you, especially when you are in the midst of a change as a business, really, you need to really get Mindy on your team because she is going to help you. I promise. The book is entitled The Mindshift Effect. You are listening to her here on A New Direction. Hey folks, Epic Physical Therapy, my physical therapist. I think they should be yours too. They offer the most advanced top-of-the-line equipment, including the Alter G anti-gravity treadmill, Normatec compression sleeves, and Game Ready, my favorite. That's just a few. They are trained and certified most comprehensive, cutting-edge treatments available like blood flow restriction therapy, dry needling, cupping, and that's just a few. So listen, when you're ready for your epic relief, your epic recovery, your epic results, don't look any further. Go to epicpt.com. It's EPICPT.com. And Linda Craft Team Realtors. Listen, I want to just tell you something. LindaCraft.com, LINDACRAFT.com is the most comprehensive real estate website that I have ever seen. It is fantastic. It has all the listings. It has information about the area. They have a network of people all over the world. Since they're unaffiliated with any company, they can find the best realtor in your area for you. Check them out, lindacraft.com. The website is fantastic. Remember, it's LINDACRAFT.com. And we're back here on A New Direction with my friend, I think I can call her friend, Mindy Vail. We haven't actually done the formal process of friendship. We haven't signed any contracts or anything like that, but I feel like she's my friend. But the Mindshift Effect, where change management is redefined and leadership is refined. Mindy, I'm going to jump to part 3. By the way, I should let people know that in this book, Mindy has this divided up into different parts or sections. And at the end of each chapter, if you will, she has a reflection piece of ask some really poignant questions. And at the end of each part or section, she asks these deeper questions in regard to change and leading change. And they're really, really, I think they're fantastic and they're fundamental. So this book is not just a book to read. This is a book to help you reflect and really think through what you're doing, which is what I really appreciate about this book. Part 3 is entitled The Role of Leadership in Driving Innovation and Embracing Change. And you talk about leading by example. You talk about empowering and supporting employees. You talk about removing roadblocks. But one of the things that you also talk about is celebrate success. Yeah. Talk about the importance of celebrating success when it comes to change.
It is so important. When we feel appreciated and acknowledged, we thrive under those circumstances. Whether it's just us saying, hey, that was a really great job, Mindy, you killed it. Or if that is a leader recognizing their team for work well done, again, we are fueling our brain to feel good. And when our brain feels good, it wants more of that. And so when we acknowledge, appreciate, value, we are literally fueling the cars out of the gates to just go speeding around the racetrack because they want to do more, right? That positive affirmation. And so celebrating even the smallest changes, like, wow, today I did that. I didn't think I could do that, but I did it. It may feel small to someone else, but I did that. That again, full circle back to gratitude. You're fueling your brain's positive response systems. And that then is a catalyst for just empowering those around you.
Yeah, so much of this, right? I think we underestimate the power of what our brain is doing in all of this, right? And I think this is one of the points that you point out in the book quite beautifully, by the way. And that is that, everything that you're doing, your behavior, your thinking, your thought process, everything that you're doing goes back to this cycle of, okay, then what's your brain going to do with it? And we can retrain our brain. And that's the point she's really making here is you can retrain your brain. It doesn't have to be static. And that's the beautiful part of what she's saying here. Part 4 of your book is entitled Communication Mastery. And the first chapter in this is called Be Transparent and Authentic. And listen, you are not going to talk to another person who believes in transparency and authenticity more than me. I promise you won't. But let's talk about it for a second, because I think for most people, when it comes to leadership, we question their transparency and we question their authenticity. Talk about the importance and how it leads to helping us get through change.
So this is critical because we have leaders who under communicate, and then we have leaders who over communicate, and it's always a puzzle to figure out what pieces to put in that communication chain and how to communicate it and who to communicate it, when to communicate it. It's fine-tuned for every different environment you're in and who's involved, who your stakeholders are. So you as a leader have to know your organizational culture. You have to be in tune with your culture. Who are the people you're serving? Who are the people who will be most greatly impacted by this change initiative? And how will they respond to different methods of communication? Some groups may just need a tiny bit of information. We don't need to over communicate things. Others need it like a lot of it. And I use this analogy in the book of a Boston Marathon of leaders who are trying to communicate a change, but they take off as that starting gun shoots off. They take off and they say, okay, the race has started. That's their communication. Well, they're already long gone. The people way in the back, thousands of people behind, don't even hear that communication. They didn't get it. And they have no idea that the race has even started, no less what's happening. And so if we don't know and we aren't totally in tune with our audience, how are we going to know how to communicate with them properly? So to be an honest, authentic, transparent communicator, we have to first know who it is we are dealing with. We also have to know our own weaknesses, right? And that goes with that self-awareness piece that I'm so passionate about, of what might get in the way of our own communication style to make this a successful communication campaign. And that can be our own biases, conscious or unconscious. It can be our own limitations we put on ourselves. It can be our own triggers. There's so many things that can get in the way of that. But when we are starting a campaign to let others know of this change initiative, to know what our limitations are is really important. And have somebody else's eyes on it. Don't assume that my way is going to work for everybody, because it probably won't. Mm. And so get other people to give you feedback. Ask, receive. You're not the only one involved in this. So, swallow your pride a little bit. Say, I don't know everything. And if we want this to go well, if we want to go from our current state to our desired state, our communication has to be in sync.
And you have to, and I'm glad that you said this, because this is really important here. As leaders, you've got to be able to embrace yourself, and you've got to have enough self-awareness to understand who you are, because we are going to see through an inauthentic leader who is not being transparent. By the way, we're going to see you if you're inauthentic in who you are, if you're trying to be something that you're not, your employees are going to see it. If you're not I'm going to rule with an iron fist, and that's never been your style, folks, you're a joke. You really are. I'm going to tell a true story here. I was playing college football, and I'll never forget, we were playing an opponent that was way better than we were, way bigger than we were in college. And I remember our coach giving a pregame speech, and he tried to convince us that if we won this game, that we would somehow have a chance at a playoff opportunity. None of us believed him, because he was speaking in ways that were just not him, right? And we none of us believed him. We knew we knew that this was going to be a really rough game, and if we just survived, that would be a really good goal. Okay, if we could keep our limbs, we knew it. And so we see this in leaders quite frequently, where they're in the midst of change, either because it's been dictated to them or not dictated to them, and then they go out and they are something different than they are, and it never works.
No, and you're absolutely right. It's a great example of the coach, and I've seen that time and time again. And I would say that it's maybe better not to say anything at all
Mm,
than to say things that don't feel authentic,
mm, mm.
to your point, because people are going to see right through it.
Right.
And in my opinion, self-awareness isn't just a key to leadership, it's the key.
Mm,
If you don't know your own strengths, your own weaknesses, your own conscious and unconscious biases, your own motivations, how can you help others
mm,
in them seeing theirs? And how can you help others in their responses to change and stressors and just your everyday work life that happens, the routines that get upended? How, if you don't know how you respond and react, how can you help others? And so for me, that's something that with my clients, I practice a lot of where are you in your self-awareness? And how do you know that? Just to say you're self-aware is not enough.
right.
Talk to me about how you know that you're a 5 out of 10 or an 8 out of 10. What does that look like in your everyday interactions? And being able to understand and manage your own emotions allows you to then open up again that psychologically safe environment for others to do the same.
Mm. We've got just a couple of minutes left, and and it goes so fast, doesn't it? I mean, it just seemed like we just got started here.
No.
Um, uh, Part 6 is strategic planning. Can you just give a couple minutes about the importance of vision, mission, and values when it comes to change?
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of my favorite parts because it ties everything together. And I have worked with leaders who don't have a strategy, vision, mission, and then I've worked with leaders who do. And the difference is astounding. And so I equate it to kind of a GPS in your car. I went to Dallas for the first time on a work business trip, and a friend of mine was in the car with me, and the GPS was lagging, and we missed every exit we needed to take, and we went way out of our way. And we knew that we had this tool that should be helping us, but it didn't. And so we just ended up laughing the whole time after getting frustrated because it was just so silly. But that's really what a strategy and a mission and a vision, whether it be corporate organizational in scope or whether it just be team, it is so important to have that kind of North Star that we can rely on, that provides a consistent message that we can go back to and remind ourselves, why are we here? What are we doing? What's the purpose?
Mm,
And it brings meaning to our work if it is created the right way. And there is a right and a wrong way to develop strategy, mission, vision. And I have workshops that I work with employees to develop those team missions, team visions, and then organizationally, how does that happen? Who's involved? Who needs to be involved? Who doesn't need to be involved? And that's always an interesting conversation to have. But it really is important because it's like anything else. We want to know why we're here. We want to feel like we're providing some value. But if we don't have the why, as Simon Sinek would say, what are we doing?
right. Yeah. How do I connect myself? How do I connect myself to the greater purpose? And what is my purpose in the greater purpose? Right. And then how is that translated not only in, and is the vision clear enough that I can jump on board of it? Is the mission something that I am in alignment with? Are they in alignment with my own core values or the core values of the company? Is this change in alignment with the core values that I signed up for? Right. All those things I think that you bring up here are terribly powerful. You've been a fabulous guest. Thank you for coming on today. It's been a lot of fun for me. Tell people how they can get a hold of you.
Absolutely. So the book, The Mindshift Effect, is on Amazon, and then they can reach out to me on LinkedIn, and they can either search me under Mindy Vail or under The Mindshift Effect. I'd love to hear from you and connect with you. That'd be great. And then my website is themindshifteffect.com as well.
Yeah, and we'll put that up in the write-up in the blog post for everybody too, so that they can get right to Mindy. And because you're going to want to talk to her, I promise you will. I mean, she's brilliant. The book is so good, and it really is. I'll be writing the Amazon 5-star review, and I'm telling you, it is just really a practical toolkit. We didn't even get to some other meaty points. We went that like we could have gone over, but there is a lot here in a very short period of book. So make sure you get your copy of the Mindshift Effect. You're going to be so glad that you did, and so will your people. I promise you. Stay with me, Mindy. Folks, this is a show. You know what I say to you every week, right? You know what? You control three things: your attitude, your effort, and your resiliency. Life throws us a lot of things, but you know what? You choose what attitude you want to have today, and that can be positive. Your effort, well, that's your excellence. So how excellent do you want to be today? And your resilience, well, we all get punched in the gut or punched in the teeth, but it's up to us to get back up again. Get back up, because you know what? You're worth it. I promise you that you are. I'm going to be back next week with another great guest. It's going to be another great book. It's going to be another great show. As I say to you all over the world, you had a lot of choices. You chose us. Thank you. Give us a 5-star review and make it a positive one, would you please? Give us a thumbs up on YouTube. As I say to you all over the world, you know what that is. Ciao, everybody.